Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This time, we're covering a show that Q forced me to do. It's the Great American Bash 2007.
You are welcome. This is my moment. This is my platform. This is my stage, ladies and gentlemen. I have been waiting for so long to make you all watch and listen to a breakdown of Bobby Lashley's finest hour. And here it is. And admit it, it was good.
Oh, I mean, not only was the main event great, this show dramatically blew away my expectations.
Absolutely.
I think of kind of this period, this like I don't know, I'd probably just call this the Cena era, but like clearly post ruthless aggression at this point. I think of it all as kind of a slog, but this show turned out to be very, very good.
Like this, top to bottom, like if you looked at this show on paper, which I imagine most of you are doing on Wikipedia right now just to see what's coming up on this show, it looks terrible. Like all of these matches feature at least one person who kind of sucks. But so it's amazing that all of these matches turn out to be basically the best case scenarios of themselves.
And it's weird to think about it this way, and we're gonna talk about kind of the context of this show. This happens a few weeks after the Chris Benoit murder suicide. The company is very much in a haze at this point, but I think the fact that they just had to kind of dial things back and do some straight traditional pro wrestling here, and I think it kind of helped the quality of the show because there's not a lot of nonsense here. It's mostly just straight up finishes.
Oh yeah. It's unfortunately, there's no real positive spin to put on the Chris Benoit thing. There's not. Even things that seem like they may have come positive out of it, like wrestlers being taken care of more and being taken, like the drug program being taken more seriously and all that kind of stuff. Even that, it's not really worth it for what actually happened. But if I have to give a compliment, I mean, a lot of like real wrestling comes out of this. A lot of simplified booking comes out of it because they have no booking ideas. Their whole booking thing was like wrapped around the Vince death, and they had to torpedo it, and so they like are left with like, well, fuck.
That at minimum was going to carry them like through the summer, and I think they'd probably book that out to like WrestleMania. If I had to guess, I think WrestleMania was going to be built around like Ken Kennedy versus either Triple H or Shane, like fighting for control of the company.
Absolutely.
So and that all gets torpedoed.
Not just that, but Edge gets hurt like 2 weeks before this.
Yeah.
So now we're like short a world champion and we have no storylines. So like
just the era of that world title being cursed. It was like every guy who got that belt got hurt and had to forfeit it.
Yeah. Like it's a nightmare to hold that title. I think it happened to Batista like 5 times.
Constantly. Edge too.
I think it happened to Orton once. Like it's just horrible.
So like we mentioned, this is just weeks after the Benoit murder suicide. This is not at all a podcast about that, but to kind of establish the context this show takes place in, we kind of have to go through that. The previous pay-per-view was Vengeance Night of Champions, which is a very strange pay-per-view title.
Absolutely bizarre. And
it's just a mishmash of 2 pay-per-views.
And it's not like at the time, the Night of Champions thing seemed kind of weird. Like it's not really something that they were doing at the time.
This was the first one, and they had so many belts back then. I mean, they've got even more today. But
I love that they like held themselves to like, well, we said we were going to put all the belts on the line, so here's 42 title matches.
Yeah. The fun of trying to figure out like how you were going to do all the title matches and like fit everybody on the card was always something.
Yeah. And then like the weeks and the run-ups it's just like, all right, we have to come up with a reason for everyone to have a title shot in the whole show. So just like battle royal after battle royal.
Yeah. So that pay-per-view was June 24th, 2007. As we know, that's the weekend that Benoit killed his wife and then his son and ultimately himself. Like, I believe he literally like watched the pay-per-view with his son and I think killed him that night.
And while again, we're not, this isn't all about that. One of the primary things that happens then, just specifically in terms of the booking on the show, is it radically alters John Morrison and CM Punk's careers.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Morrison in particular, this was his big break. Without this, they probably would have just ended up releasing him. They didn't as far as I know, have any plans for him.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were. He had this new character, but it wasn't being taken very seriously.
No, he didn't get the John Morrison character until after he got the belt.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe they were going to do it anyway, but he's still Johnny Nitro when he wins the belt. They make him John Morrison like 2 weeks later. My guess is that repackaging was probably going to happen anyway.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they just throw the ECW title on him because they substitute him for Benoit.
It's so fascinating because this was supposed to be Punk's big break.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be Punk feuds with Chris Benoit for 6 months and then gets made. And instead, it winds up making Morrison a little bit. Like, they both get a lot more exposure than they had before because they get to wrestle each other on pay-per-view like 10 times.
Over and over. But Punk, yeah, I did not think it was great that Punk just had to lose to Morrison, I don't know, 5 times in a row before he finally beat him.
Yeah. Punk just gets kind of left in the middle of nowhere. But like, and then when Morrison loses the title, he's in the same spot. He'll be in the dirt sheet with the Miz in a year's time, just trying to get on shows.
Yeah. So the main event that night was John Cena retaining the WWE Championship in a fatal 5-way championship invitational where all former world champions on Raw were invited to participate. So it was Cena against Bobby Lashley, Randy Orton, King Booker, and Mick Foley. What a group of dudes that is.
Yeah. Can I just say, too, that, like, the idea of that championship invitational is one of my favorite ideas ever. Just like, if you've ever won a world title, come on down, get a shot.
You know, the only thing I didn't like about it, they jobbed the Sandman and didn't put him in there.
Yeah, man, come on.
Lashley, what? Only the WWE version of the ECW title counts? What kind of bullshit is that?
I just would have loved if it would have just been like, Shane Douglas, come on down.
God, yeah.
David Arquette, hop in the ring.
So Raw the next night, June the 25th, was a special 3-hour Raw that was going to be built around the Vince McMahon limo explosion storyline. So we should back up and sort of try to explain the craziness of the Vince McMahon character arc at this point. So at WrestleMania, they had the Battle of the Billionaires where his man Umaga loses to Lashley. So Lashley and Steve Austin and Donald Trump get to shave Vince's head. What a weird sentence that is to say out loud.
The President of the United States and Bobby Lashley shave Vince McMahon's head live on pay-per-view.
And then the president took a stunner. The worst stunner ever.
Even worse than the Linda McMahon falling down stunner. This is the worst one.
So Vince in storyline then kind of goes crazy. He starts wearing there's a couple different versions of this. Like he wears a hat and like refuses to show his bald head, but he gets exposed by Lashley.
It makes him look like a bizarre like British gangster from the 40s.
Yes, totally. And then at some point he starts wearing like a do-rag and like I mean, for lack of a more artful term, like he starts talking black.
There's no other way to put this. Like, Vince starts talking black and wearing a do-rag to feud with Bobby Lashley.
Yeah. And he wins the ECW title.
He beats him for the title.
Yeah. It's like a 1-on-3 handicap match against Vince and Shane and Umaga. And Vince manages to pin Lashley and wins the ECW title. And it's goddamn hilarious.
It is. It's morally reprehensible as all hell. But just seeing him win the belt is the height of hilarity.
How much of that was just a fuck you to Paul Heyman?
I guess it's like, hey Paul, I got your belt.
I mean, he put his own world title on himself, so like it's not like it's hypocrisy here.
Does it stun you to your very core that he did not put the WCW title on himself before he hung it up?
Absolutely, yeah. I would have thought he would have wanted that Triple Crown title.
Fucking Vince McMahon, the only Triple Crown champ.
So yeah, the Vince McMahon like jive talking ECW champion. What a bizarre character turn, but absolutely hilarious.
Well, the other thing too is that like Bobby Lashley doesn't get his win back. Like he doesn't. Like Vince doesn't really get a comeuppance from that because Bobby Lashley gets drafted to Raw. Like
No, Lashley
immediately.
does. Lashley does win the belt back, and then right after that, he gets drafted to Raw, and he has to give the belt up.
I know, but that's the thing is that it feels so weird. Like
It
he
is
beats
really
him, but then
rushed.
immediately gives the title
Yeah,
back.
they just Raw. They needed more. They needed more on Raw. Like Raw needed a new star.
And as we're going to talk about later on this show, it was absolutely the right choice to bring Lashley on at this point,
Yeah.
especially with what they wind up doing with him.
So Vince is despondent after losing the ECW title, and he's just like, I don't know, this like darkness has just fallen over him, and like starts talking in a heavy Southern accent for some reason.
Yeah, that was
It's
weird.
just like literally the storyline is just like Vince has lost his damn mind.
I guess like I remember at the time like going down this deep rabbit hole because there are all these theories online about what was happening and is Vince going to get a different character and is this leading to some kind of storyline? And like I remember going down like this deep rabbit hole like, well, he's originally from the South. Maybe he's trying to tell us that he's unraveled so much that the facade of Vince McMahon is falling. It's all horseshit, but like that's how deep inside my own head I would get about these things.
I was like, maybe he's possessed by a demon. Like,
Ooh,
yeah,
Bray Wyatt.
it was a very, I mean, just the Vince
There was no
McMahon
rhyme or
character
reason
at
to
this point.
Like
No.
nothing was explained on TV. He was just unraveling.
Yeah. So he's losing his mind. And then there's the famous ending of Raw where like everything has gone wrong for Vince. And we get this long tracking shot of him like walking out of the building, and he like uneasily like crosses paths with a bunch of wrestlers. Paul London famously smiles at him, and this got London in a ton of trouble backstage for some reason.
And like it's not just a smile, it's like a gigantic toothy grin.
It's like a Joker grin.
Yeah. Here's the thing is we don't really talk about this Vince McMahon blowing up thing. It's mostly just like a joke, like, oh, Russell crap. This is a really well done segment. Like it's a through line throughout the whole show that like Vince just feels like something's off and wrong and ominous.
Yeah.
And then it's genuinely spooky how this works. Like we've never watched like one long tracking shot of someone walking out of the arena.
You knew something you knew something like this was about to happen. Like he's good. Like he's about like honestly, oddly, it reminds me of Mr. Burns being shot on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just like that. It's just like
I don't remember like JR being shot on Dallas, but it's probably an homage to that because that's what who shot Mr. Burns was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's just like he's walking down this hallway and it's silence. There's no music. There's no commentary. Every single staff member and wrestler is lined up on the wall just looking at him. Yeah. Nobody says anything. And Vince himself is acting like he's just scared. Like you don't see Vince look scared. And like not in like an overacting kind of way, just like he's uneasy.
Yeah.
And then he gets in the car slowly.
Yeah, he like does this. He kind of gets back out, hesitates, then gets back in, and he shuts the door, and the limo explodes.
And like I remember it going off the air, and like that was some of the most excited I've ever been watching a Raw. It's just like, what the fuck is going to happen?
Like, there's never been anything like this. The only thing I can think of that's similar to this is when Shane McMahon knocked Kane into a flaming dumpster.
Right.
And it was like Kane was dead, and then Kane was just like back the next week.
Yeah. But I mean, like, that's Kane.
Yeah.
So like resurrecting himself from the dead isn't all that weird. But like this was like, oh shit. Because Vince McMahon did not want to be on television anymore.
Yes. That is at the core of this, is Vince wanted to get off TV, and the way they came up with to write him off was to kill him.
Yes. Which is insane, but you felt that in that moment that like, oh, there's not going to be a Vince McMahon anymore.
He's dead. Like literally, he got in a limo and exploded. He's dead.
What is this show going to be without Vince McMahon?
Yeah. The intrigue here is so massive. Can we think about all the ways they tried to write Vince off over the series of these years? Oh, here he dies. A year after this, Donald Trump buys Raw. but they have to pull the plug on it because their stock starts tanking
because
because
people think it's real.
investors think that Trump has actually bought Raw and is going to run into the ground like he did all of his businesses.
Yeah, let's just put that just in a nutshell for a second. That this person who not quite half of the country voted for wasn't even thought well enough of at the time to run WWE.
To run a wrestling company.
Jesus
To
Christ.
fake run a wrestling company.
But like, yeah, that's how fucking dumb people are. That people literally started selling their shares because, like, oh no, Vince McMahon's not in charge anymore.
The
No,
same
thank
thing
you.
happened here. Their stock tanked after they did this death thing, and they put out a statement that was like, Monday saw the demise of the Mr. McMahon. I mean, they basically were like, Vince McMahon is still alive. It was just the Mr. McMahon character who died.
Well, they always made a very clear distinction
Yes.
where, like, nobody on TV called him Vince. You had to call him Mr. McMahon because they're different people.
Yeah.
That's so stupid.
And then I think later in the summer in 2008, you remember when they did that thing where like the stage collapsed on him?
Well, that was when they were giving away all the money, right?
Yeah, because they had to get out of the $1 million giveaway.
Yeah. Where like a part of the stage falls and Vince is like, huh, that's weird. And then it just all falls on him.
Yes, which is basically a redo of the limo explosion.
And even then they couldn't do it because every time they try, something ridiculously huge would happen and Vince would have to go on screen and address it and ruin the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't actually remember when he came back from that one. I think he actually was gone for a little while that time.
But like, think of all the times that like Orton punts him, Kevin Owens headbutts him. Like, he doesn't want to be on TV.
But it's just like he knows he can get ratings. Like he knows if he makes an appearance, the ratings will go up. It's one of the last bankable draws they have.
Sadly true.
It will always be a big deal when Vince shows up. So yeah, I mean, so things that happened. A bunch of people called the police. Again, it's not real. Guys, don't we know this? In 2007?
How amazing is it that just like imagine you're watching television, you're watching professional wrestling, assumedly you're some kind of fan of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
And you see a limo blow up on your screen, clearly, if you've ever seen a film in your entire fucking life, filmed to be a segment in that way, and you're just like, oh man, I better alert the authorities.
Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. Somebody assassinated Vince McMahon on live TV.
I must be the only one who's thinking to call the police right now. I better let them know about this murder that took place on live television.
Yeah. And the stock tanked because, again, I mean, I don't want to say that investors thought it was real, but I think there was just this rally, this like snowball effect of, oh, people are going to think that's real, so I need to sell my stock.
Well, it might even be beyond that, too, because, again, you said that he was one of the few bankable ratings characters, and that's true.
Yeah, and if you know wrestling, you're like, oh, they're not going to have the McMahon character anymore. Like, that's going to be bad for business long term.
I don't know that I necessarily would have thought that at the time, but I can understand if somebody
did. By this point.
Yeah, thank God.
You're so ready for a break. Yeah. So ready. And it only ends up being a couple weeks. So this June 25th Raw was a special 3-hour episode, which, as you'll remember, they did like quarterly back then, I'd say.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more frequently. Every other month or so, they'd have a special 3-hour Raw. This one was going to be built around the McMahon limo explosion. The word was like it was going to be the investigation, and like at the end of the night, they were going to arrest Linda, and she was going to be falsely accused of killing Vince.
See, that could have been really interesting. Like all the people who you think it would be, them investigating Triple H and Shane,
Stephanie, again, Bret Hart. Like everybody had a motive to kill Vince.
Oh yeah, Bischoff, Heyman.
Bret Hart made his first on-screen appearance back just a couple weeks before this. They did the like McMahon appreciation night where like everybody just ended up dragging him, and they did like a quick pre-taped interview with Bret like at the gym in Calgary. So that was a huge landmark. We saw Bret Hart on WWE TV for the first time in 10 years.
I forgot about the McMahon appreciation night because that only further indicated that, everyone was a suspect on the entire roster.
Yeah, that's 100% what they were building to. The Rock may have been on that night too.
I would have loved that promo where the police interview The Rock. in Hollywood.
Yeah. So, okay. They're going to do this special episode. That Monday afternoon, I think the news broke that Benoit had killed his family. I don't remember. So, my thing was, I had just graduated from high school and I was like coaching at a summer camp. So, I was like gone all afternoon and I got home like from the camp and Raw had already started and I turned it on and I'm just like, why are they showing like some random Chris Benoit match? And like then it just slowly dawns on me like what's happening.
Yeah. I had been online all that day. I woke up that morning to the news. So like they already knew
Oh, it broke
vaguely.
first thing in the morning. I don't remember that.
There was news that something had happened like first
Yeah,
thing in the morning. And it was just like around noon. So it's not like first thing in the morning. But I remember like all throughout the course of the day, like little bits of information start coming in and like people's speculation and all of that stuff. And it wasn't until like 10 o'clock that like somebody first is like, yeah, he killed them.
yeah. So to go, yeah. I mean to go over my process here. So I mean, as I turn on Raw, it becomes clear like it's a tribute show. So I like run downstairs to the computer to like get on the internet and try to figure out what's happening. When I hear they're all dead, I'm just like that him and his son and his wife all died. I'm just like, how did they all die?
Yeah.
Like that's the immediate. I'm like carbon monoxide leak, like some sort of horrible home invasion, like other
Something felt off about that.
yeah, it's
from
just
like
like
the second you hear.
the other thing I thought of is like, did he like come home and find them dead and like kill himself in grief? Like, I didn't go to murder suicide right away, but something about it felt off. It's like, how do three people die in a way that's not a car accident or like the house exploded?
Right.
It just felt very wrong.
Well, like the first report I saw about it too said murder, and then like a bunch of people took it back.
Then it's like, yeah, but you're like, well, who the hell was the murder? Something like, again, like home invasion gone bad, but like they killed a little kid.
Yeah,
It
because
doesn't feel right.
there were already jokes about like, haha, Kevin Sullivan murdered Chris Benoit finally at like that afternoon. But it wasn't like those people felt real bad when the real news started coming in.
Yeah. So yeah, it was during the course of the show, more details began to emerge. And they, yeah, probably around 10:30 start to like realize that they are presenting a tribute show to a man who murdered his wife and young son.
Well, then this will ever be, unfortunately, part of William Regal's legacy.
Yes.
That like it's clear that he's the first one who knows something is
He
wrong.
totally, because Regal lived down in Atlanta. He lived in like the same town. I think he knew somebody on the police force down there, and like like got tipped off by the guy that like, yeah, like he did it. Like this was a murder suicide.
Yeah, so they're literally putting because like all of the Benoit like group of friends, everybody knows like the Eddie and
Chavo, Jericho, Edge, Triple H.
Yeah, they're putting them all on there to give testimonials. And like the first hour, it's all like he was the best fucking guy I ever met. He was the best worker of all time. And then Regal goes on. He's just like, well, he was always a bit of a troubled individual. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah, he's like all I can really say is he was an incredible performer in the ring. It's kind of, what a situation to be put in. Like, presumably minutes after he finds out that this guy who was his friend, and like beyond that, I mean, the way his friends talk about him, like, not only did they respect him, like, I've heard Chris Jericho say, like, of all the people he knew, if he needed to trust one person he knew with his children's lives, it would have been Chris Benoit.
Oh, yeah.
Like, people were like, yeah, he loved his kids. Like, everybody loved his kids, but like Chris Benoit loved his kids. Like, would go hours out of his way just to spend time with them, spend an hour with them. So, I mean, for everybody. But I also think on some level, people knew he had changed in the last year of his life.
Well, yeah. And then all the stories start coming out from like, hey, Chris Benoit is the most scarily intense man who's ever walked the face of the earth. And then those stories about like how that's awesome and how hardworking and intense he is start turning to, oh, actually, maybe he was fucking insane.
Yeah, when you hear that he, punished himself by doing 1,000 squats because he blew one spot in like a 5-star match.
The signs were there, but like, yeah, I think Chavo had the interview that really like crystallized it for me, where he was just like, yeah, that's the Chris Benoit I knew in 2007 is not the same guy that I like.
And it's so many. I mean, it's so many factors. It's grief, it's drugs, it's alcohol, it's concussions, it's steroids. Just all these things combining. Like playing. I mean, the concussions has always been the thing to me. Is like just at its core. Although I feel like most of the CTE cases we've seen, people only took their own lives. So this was a little different, but just a really toxic cocktail of factors here.
I mean, look, we've all been through the evidence and like the stories about Benoit 100 million times, enough to draw our own conclusions. It seems pretty obvious, honestly, that the CTE made it difficult for him to regulate and control his emotions, and that he was a deeply, deeply emotional person already.
Yeah, he was angry. He was in the final years of his life. He was angry and he was abusive and he was paranoid.
Yeah,
and it all just kind of bubbled over.
And I don't think that Eddie's death is considered enough when people talk about this issue, because it really all seems to spiral for him.
So many. I mean, Eddie, was it Rocco Rock?
Yeah,
Boss Man, Big Boss Man. I think like. It's just somebody has told the story of just like sitting at the bar with him and him just kind of staring off in the distance and being like, all my friends are dying.
Yeah.
Which they were.
And like the ones that weren't dying, like Jericho had moved on to music.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't even in the company anymore.
It was really just him and Chavo. Yeah, him and Chavo were and Chavo was like the only guy he would travel with at that point. Otherwise he was traveling alone. And the stories about like, he would take different routes from the airport to his house every time because he thought somebody was following him. And
and his marriage
was real dark. So I mean, there's again, I don't want this to become like the Chris Benoit episode. There's some phenomenal podcasts about this. Jericho had Chavo on to talk about it. Jericho had Nancy's sister, which was tremendous to hear. It was great to hear, like, because Nancy kind of gets ignored in this. I feel like just very much is like cast in the background. She had a very like interesting and impressive wrestling career in her own right, and it's very much a kind of fascinating figure. And to hear kind of the side of the story from Nancy's family was very interesting.
Absolutely.
And she kind of said the same thing as everybody, that like, that Chris changed a lot, and that she, on the one hand, she never would have thought he was capable of this until, the last few months when, he became incredibly violent and scary.
And that's the thing. That's what everybody repeated over and over again. It's like, I never would have thought he would have done this, but now looking back, the warning signs were
all there.
Yeah.
So this is a PR debacle for WWE.
Oh my God. Yeah. The worst ever.
Wall to wall coverage of this on, not on every like cable news show, but like Nancy Grace, Geraldo Rivera, the more like tabloidy true crime shows. Even like, I bet even like Sean Hannity did some segments on like steroids and wrestling. Like, it was all boiled down to roid rage.
Yeah. And like, this is the thing. It's that this is the first time WWE's had a scandal since like the 24-hour news cycle began.
Yeah.
Where like people are just looking for stories, and here's one. And like literally they just they keep pounding the steroids thing over and over.
Which like played a role in it, but I don't feel like it's the main part of the story.
Honestly, it's probably like the fifth factor of like 10. It's not the story, but like that's the story they want to tell, and it connects to the previous WWE story.
Yes, Vince McMahon steroid. We get everything here. We get tons of old wrestlers being brought out of the woodwork to trash WWE. In many ways, they deserve it. This is a company that just sort of allowed drug use to run wild in their company for years and years.
Oh goodness, yes.
But there's also a lot of really bad journalism that took place here.
And Mark Marrow gets himself blacklisted for life. For basically, like, not just telling the truth, but like he makes up a bunch of shit too. And just like literally becomes like a demon. And like Jericho gets made for life by going
Yeah.
on and being the only guy who really defends the company.
Yeah, Jericho basically became their press secretary, and showed he's not even with the company at this point, right?
Like he
Yeah, but
literally
he
just does it on his
throws
own.
himself in front of them like a shield.
And I mean, like he probably, had he not chosen to leave, would have had a job until he was 90 years old for that.
Yeah.
Like it's Vince remembers when you do that stuff for him.
Yeah. So the next night on ECW, Vince opens the show by like kind of sort of apologizing for doing the tribute show.
Yeah.
He's like, last night we presented a tribute show to Chris Benoit. 24 hours later, the details of this horrific tragedy have become apparent. So going forward, the only mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight will be these remarks, and our performers will go out tonight and do what they do best, which is entertain you. And then, I mean, like it was, I think ECW that night was like a non-storyline show. It was just a bunch of matches. I think SmackDown was too, because they had taped SmackDown that night. So it was just kind of cold matches, no real storylines, nothing heavy.
Yeah.
And so the next Monday, because it's pro wrestling and the show always goes on, they have to do a Raw on July 2nd. It was just, it's tough. Like things were very strange for several months at this point. The next couple months, every time I turned the show on, you had to think about Benoit. Every time a guy took a headshot, it was a strange couple months here.
Yep. I can't think of another example in wrestling history where something like this happens and has so many ripples throughout like the entire, not just WWE, the entire wrestling industry for years afterwards. This affects everything. Yeah. This affects the move to PG to sort of help them save face and get their advertisers back. This affects the change in the style
policy.
Yeah. This affects the style of wrestlers that they go looking for after that, because now they actually have to start drug testing. So we start to get way less jacked guys. Like this changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a second on this one. So the wellness policy was put in effect after Eddie, but this is when they actually give it teeth and like really start suspending guys. And so the next couple of years, we get loads of drug suspensions of top stars.
And I mean, like to the point where it gets like kind of like literally so many major storylines get derailed by this.
It's constant. Yeah, I mean, you think about it. How many guys got Booker, Edge, Orton, Kennedy, Mysterio? It's almost easier to name the big stars who didn't fail any tests.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that like maybe CM Punk just gets released if it's not for this. You know what I mean? Like he gets a mega push like the following year, and I honestly have always believed that it was at least partially just because they knew he wasn't on drugs.
Yeah, it ends Jeff Hardy's WWE run. They have to cut ties with him because like they can't have a guy who clearly has a drug problem on their roster.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. The move to PG officially happens the next year, I think, but this is the beginning of that. I mean, this is also, I believe, when they ban chair shots to the head. For very good reason, I would say.
What we think of as PG isn't really what the company thinks of as PG. Like they're thinking of PG as just like adult situations and stuff like that, like where they literally want a PG rating to put on the television show once they have like TV ratings up in the upper left corner. What we think of PG also involves like the level of violence that they do, and they stop that cold right here. Like it's any sort of headshot at all, like dangerous spots in general, they just go away.
So on that Raw, they're back to storylines, but it's still got to be like a wrestling heavy show. So they do a beat the clock thing to determine who's going to fight Cena at the Great American Bash. And Bobby Lashley ends up being the winner when he smashes Shelton Benjamin with a huge spear, as Benjamin is like springboarding off the top rope to win in less than 5 minutes and earn the number one contender spot.
Awesome. That's actually an underrated match if you've never seen it.
Yeah, as Shelton is like just desperately trying to run away from Lashley to run the clock out.
Okay, this is the point where we should probably talk about Bobby Lashley.
Yeah.
If you weren't watching at this time, I completely understand if you think Bobby Lashley was a big bag of shit, because a lot of people did. To be
Yeah.
perfectly frank, like he came in way before he was ready. Green as
Yeah.
grass. Like the fucking feud over the cheeseburgers with Simon Dean, for fuck's sake.
So the backstory is late in 2005. He's in like OVW and just getting started, and they like bring him to SmackDown just to like have the writers meet him and have a bunch of guys, talk to him, kind of get some ideas for how they're going to bring him up like a year from now. And Vince sees him and is just like, "Well, goddamn, why isn't that stud on our TV show?" And they debut him like the next week.
But Vince, he like just finished wrestling training.
Yeah,
Like,
he has no. I mean, his ring work was never horrible. His promos are painful. He never should have spoken.
understand, Bobby Lashley never got a promo class. Bobby Lashley never got promo training. Bobby Lashley learned how to cut any kind of promo on television,
Yeah,
which is the worst fucking way to learn how to do that. Like, it's a nightmare.
yeah,
And then, like, so, like, they debut him. It's a mess, but they just have him start running through people. And until he gets to Finley, like, he's a lost cause. It's not going to happen.
yeah. And then they put him with Finley, and they have a long feud with a bunch of good matches. Just like Finley's a miracle worker.
And, like, here's the thing. And, like, this is true of a lot of bigger wrestlers, like guys Lashley's size, is that if they're too tentative in the ring, it's not going to work. Like, I always point out this example, but like Ezekiel Jackson, for example, is a giant of a man. Great look, right? When he actually got in the ring and wrestled, he never looked like he was going to hurt a fly. And unfortunately, like that, while you may not realize what a big deal that is, like it derails big guys. Like, because they're so in their everyday lives used to being so careful. Because when you're that big and that strong, you can genuinely hurt people by accident. And once they get in the ring, they're so worried about hurting people that they don't do what they're supposed to do. And that's what Lashley was like for the first several months until he got with Finley, who I'm sure was just telling him, like, hit me with live shots. You're not going to hurt me, kid.
Yeah. So yeah, he works with Finley for a while. He wins the U.S. title from JBL. Just kind of, plugs along kind of solidly in the mid card on SmackDown. Gets kind of moved into the main event in the fall. Then they move him to ECW. As we covered at December to Dismember, he wins the ECW title. And then they decide to put him in one of the biggest matches in the history of the company as he headlines WrestleMania 23 in the Battle of the Billionaires against Umaga. What an insane choice of two wrestlers to put in that match.
It's so, when you look back at that and the people that they could have chosen, like that could have been like Cena
Shawn
and Batista, or
Michaels,
like,
yeah.
Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker.
Booker T, like, they're not
They-
short on veteran stars.
They pick who are clearly the guy Vince is the highest on and the guy he knows can deliver in Lashley and Umaga, respectively.
Yeah.
Like, this is as big a sign that like Vince sees Lashley as a future big star as you can get.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but they're taking a look at Lashley to replace John Cena here, right?
Okay. If I don't know if it's to replace John Cena, but it definitely is to be like, all right, this is like our stable of top dudes. Like, this guy could carry the ball if Cena drops it.
Yeah.
Or if Batista keeps getting hurt. Like, this guy will carry a show.
And like, Cena's getting booed. Maybe we can turn Cena heel and Lashley can be the top face.
Yeah. Like, and here's the thing too, is that like Bobby Lashley got booed or just generally disliked by especially smart fans during his SmackDown run very heavily. Then he gets moved to ECW where like he gets shit on like he gets the blame.
It's a horrible spot.
Yeah. He's got to be the new face of ECW after December to Dismember, the worst pay-per-view of all time. His face is on it, And then like over the weeks after that in ECW, he really starts to show something. Like, his reign as ECW champion is actually pretty good. There's a lot of interesting segments. The thing where he like jumps through the cage.
That was so cool.
Awesome. Okay. Like, he starts to find himself in the ring and gets pretty good actually. And he like starts to find himself as a personality too, as just the silent ass kicker. It's like by the time he comes to Raw, most people have stopped watching ECW and don't know that he's better, and everyone's just shitting on him left and right. And then he shows up at Raw, and it's a different story.
So why do you think they pulled the trigger on Cena versus Lashley here? Do you think this was the plan before Benoit?
I don't.
I think I could see arguments for either way.
They did it so fast.
Yeah.
Like they pull Lashley onto Raw and in like 3 weeks build to this match.
Yeah. Like this seemed like it was your WrestleMania main event, right?
Well, I think I would honestly say that after watching this match again, I think that they planned to do this as like a test first.
Yeah.
And then it almost felt like at the end, like this is where you do like a Mega Powers.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have Lashley and Cena become friends. They're your top two baby faces, and then like Lashley turns on Cena.
Yeah. And
like that's your WrestleMania.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And like they don't get to do that, but that's definitely where this seems to be going.
Do you think they knew Lashley's time in WWE was drawing to a close?
No.
Okay, that is not a thing.
I don't think Lashley knew that.
Yeah.
Like
he gets hurt either in this match or like right afterwards and goes on the shelf and never comes back.
And say, here's the thing, is like we've mentioned it in passing before on other episodes, but let's just talk about why Bobby Lashley leaves. Michael P.S. Hayes is a racist.
Yep.
And he makes some really nasty, he probably didn't mean them nasty, but he's a racist, comments about Crystal Marshall, Bobby Lashley's wife.
Yep.
In protest, they both leave.
Yeah. Lashley stands up for his wife as pretty much any man would in that situation.
And WWE takes Michael Hayes' side.
Like, again, this is where you get into like why WWE can never be legitimate, because they're at their core just carny assholes. I don't want to say in any other major corporation in America, but like in most major corporations, yeah. If a mid to high level employee made a bunch of really racist comments, they would probably just get fired.
Yeah, and like especially, and it shouldn't matter who the comments are made to. It shouldn't. It should just be done because it's the right thing to do. But Bobby Lashley is a fucking that $1 million bill walking around backstage.
And who gives a shit about Michael Hayes?
Right?
What does he bring to the table? Is he a good writer? I kind of doubt it.
People say he is.
He's absolutely replaceable. There's a million former wrestlers who could do his job.
And I mean, like, I know I'm just reiterating this over and over, but I'm just saying this because I need you to understand that it's true. Because if you didn't like Bobby Lashley from that period, that's fine. If you've only watched Bobby Lashley since and don't get why he would have been potentially the top guy in the business, I understand. But like for this year, this point in time right here, Bobby Lashley was a potential super megastar. And like it gets derailed for no reason. They just let him go. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. He has a shoulder injury. He has surgery. It's expected he's going to be out a couple months, and he doesn't come back, and he doesn't come back, and he doesn't come back, and then he gets released.
Like this legitimately could have been like he comes back and wins the Rumble, goes to WrestleMania. That's the timeline.
Exactly what you would have expected.
Yes. And like instead he goes and does MMA for a while, shows up in TNA off and on for a few years, and shows back up here a decade later.
10 years later. And 10 years later, he still looks amazing.
10 years later, they had another chance at this.
And they just fucking blew it. I know.
We can't walk away without discussing this. 10 years later, they bring him back in. He has the potential to feud with Brock Lesnar and maybe beat him and be just as big a star as he was supposed to have been in the originally. And they fucked it up again.
No, because it's got to be Roman. Now, yeah, he beat Roman Reigns at that pay-per-view last year, and the match was awesome. And it's like, oh, okay, he's going to get Lesnar at SummerSlam now. Nope. He's good now.
Yeah, this pisses me off so much because like I have beat this drum for so long.
He's got the personality now.
You know. Anyway, back to this time. Back to this time. So I loved how they promoted this match.
Yes. They just did like it's a dream match. So they like do packages of how great both guys are, and they interview legends who talk about how incredible these guys are. So we get these interviews with Bret Hart, Steve Austin, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, all the legends. They just put these guys over as like these are the top two guys in this industry today. They're both so powerful, so fast, so determined. This is
I've
great.
never seen them do this before. Where they're just like, let's bring in literally every star. Like, you don't see Austin put people over in interviews like this. You don't see Flair talking about other people other than like Triple H. Like, you just don't see this. And then like going into detail, like Mick Foley's like, look, man, I know Bobby Lashley's fast and everything, but like John Cena's got the experience edge. He's been in so many big matches before. Like, you don't, just to see those guys talking about these guys puts the new guys over. Like, just the fact that like Ric Flair and Steve Austin are walking around thinking about Bobby Lashley makes Bobby Lashley a bigger deal.
Yeah. And yeah, they had some physical confrontations. Lashley just kept nailing Cena with the spear.
That was the genius of it. It's like they bring him onto Raw and they're like, look, we can't have him talk. Let's instead just have him like go out there and like it'll be unclear whether he's a heel or a face. And he starts hitting Cena with spears with like the most stank on him I've seen from Goldberg. Like he buries Cena with some spears. Yeah. And then they do a promo and he's just like, I'm not here to talk. And he just puts the mic down. And I'm like, yes.
That's what we wanted to hear.
Like, this is the Bobby Lashley that could get over. And it did. Like, by the end of the time before this comes on, he went from no reaction to a strong reaction.
Yeah, nice mix of like the dream match build, but also putting some heat on it.
Yeah, like it's just good. And by the time you get to this match, this could have just been some like jabroni fucking Great American Bash match if they don't put any build behind it. By the time you get to this feels big. This feels kind of like that Cena Roman match they did a couple years ago.
Yeah,
except actually like even. Because in that one, Cena just buried Roman.
He did. So I guess we should talk about the big thing going on. One major theme is injuries.
Yeah.
Everybody's hurt. Undertaker's hurt. Triple H is hurt. Edge is hurt. Shawn Michaels is hurt. Mysterio is hurt. Like, they don't have anybody.
Weirdly, Batista's not hurt for a second.
Somehow Batista's healthy. that won't last. But somehow Batista and Orton are both healthy, which the odds of that happening are real low. But yeah, they are very thin on stars at this moment.
So that leads to this show, which is like chock full of not stars, but like it's chock full of people looking for an opportunity and they like make the most of it.
So I guess to wrap up Raw, after Vince McMahon was brought back from the dead after Benoit actually died. And so to replace the who killed Vince, they went with who is Vince McMahon's illegitimate son.
Yes, which leads to the best Sandman story of all time.
God. Yeah, but we're just at the very beginning. I don't even know if they've launched that storyline quite yet.
No, I don't think so.
That ends up being a storyline that had great potential, but Ken Kennedy screws it up because he fails a drug test. Should also point out Ken Kennedy is supposed to be the world champion at this point, but he had an injury at the wrong time.
And then eventually he'll get fired because he injures Orton?
Yeah, he dropped Orton on his head with a suplex.
Unluckiest man in the history of wrestling.
Nobody's ever had worse timing. Not even Dolph Ziggler.
Nope.
So yeah, SmackDown at this point is just a wasteland.
I mean, in SmackDown has often been known as a wasteland, but in this case, it's just like, man, imagine the roster we could have if everyone was just actually here.
Yeah, the world champion is the Great Khali.
He went like Battle Royal.
The year before this, when they brought him in and he killed Undertaker, like he was over at that point. Now he's not. Now he's lost everybody.
Oh yeah, it feels so random to put it on him. And I get why they do, because they feel like they have to at least put it on like a dominant force.
It's just so making SmackDown the B show that like Khali just lost to Cena over on Raw definitively, and now he's the champ on SmackDown.
Just put the shit on Batista.
Yeah.
Come on. Don't stop fucking around.
Yeah, so they've had a series of weird impromptu title changes in the previous couple months. Undertaker beat Batista for the belt at WrestleMania, but then he tore his tricep. So him and Batista had a cage match on SmackDown. that ended in a draw. And then Mark Henry showed up and beat up Undertaker. And then Edge came out and cashed in Money in the Bank on Undertaker. Edge only had the Money in the Bank briefcase because Ken Kennedy had to give it up because he had turned out to be minor, I think, tricep injury that was misdiagnosed as needing surgery. So he's under the impression he's going to miss several months, but it was actually something he could have worked through, but the doctor screwed it up.
He literally was going to win the title from The Undertaker.
Instead, they take the Money in the Bank briefcase off him. Edge wins it from him. And Kennedy ends up taking a little bit of time off to heal just because he doesn't have shit to do. But yeah, he was going to get the belt here.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. Like, just terrible, terrible luck. So Edge is the champion for like a month or two, and then he gets injured taking a choke slam from Kane like 2 weeks before this show and has to forfeit the belt. So the SmackDown before this show, they have a battle royal that the Great Khali wins, and he's the world champion. And then on that same show, they have a match between Kane and Batista to determine the number one contender. And Khali interferes and attacks both of them. So Teddy Long rules that it'll have to be a triple threat match at the Great American Bash. And Khali will defend against Batista and Kane in the match made in hell.
Cool.
Yeah, the roster is in rough shape. Undertaker, Edge, Shawn Michaels, Triple H all hurt, and Benoit's dead.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not even to mention Eddie Guerrero's dead too. Eddie Guerrero would be a nice piece of this roster at this point.
Oh yeah, like there's
Chris Jericho's left to do Fozzy concerts.
Now the interesting thing is that this is the moment, like up until here, like
Kurt Angle's gone.
Yeah.
Kurt Angle's gone because he wouldn't go to rehab. The Big Show's gone because his knees are so messed up. They've had a massive exodus of talent at this point.
Up until this point, like they had almost seemed unsure about Cena. Like they had pushed him to the moon, but when the conflicting cheers start happening, they start doing like weird booking with him. But now they realize like, oh shit, Cena's all we have.
Rob Van Dam is gone. He left the company like a couple weeks before this.
Yeah.
Just listen to those names I just said. It's like 10. It's like 10 legit stars, and they don't have any of them.
No. So this is the point. Luckily, but almost miraculously, this is the part where Cena just randomly starts ripping off unbelievable match after unbelievable match. Like
everybody had to admit Cena was good when he had a good match with Khali.
Yeah, this is where Cena becomes Cena, like big match Cena. And like thank God he did, because if he had shit the bed, like they got nobody.
No. I guess he would have gone all in on Batista, but I mean the shine has kind of come off him by this point.
Yeah, I don't even know what you do, honestly.
So on ECW, Lashley was the champion, but then he got drafted to Ross. They did a tournament for the vacant ECW belt. The final was going to be CM Punk versus Chris Benoit at the Night of Champions pay-per-view. Benoit missed that pay-per-view for obvious reasons, and Johnny Nitro was substituted for Benoit and beat Punk and won the title. Interesting move there. You would have thought it would have just been like Elijah Burke or somebody who they, were actually kind of pushing at the time, but instead they pulled Nitro out of their ass.
You got to feel like Punk was pissed. It's like, why not just put the belt on me then?
Yeah, so Benoit, my understanding is, was going to beat Punk,
right.
And then they were going to have like a long-term feud that Benoit would keep, just barely beating Punk, and then Punk would finally beat him and get the big rub.
Yeah, and it'd be like the respect thing, and Benoit would be like his mentor from then on. It'd be like a big deal.
Would have been great.
Oh God, yeah. That sounds amazing. That's like a dream for any smart fan watching, I guess.
So instead, Johnny Nitro, who's been doing nothing like for months since Mercury got hurt, is the champion. And then a couple weeks later, they repackage him as John Morrison because he looks like Jim Morrison.
And while that sounds so stupid, it works so well because he does look exactly like Jim Morrison.
Super ripped version of Jim Morrison.
It's a great look, isn't it? Like the
Yeah.
whole thing is just like,
The long blow dried hair looks way better than like the greasy slicked back hair he had before. He already had most of these elements. Like he already wore like the fur coat to the ring. I don't remember if he wore like the sunglasses, but they give him the awesome entrance music and the slow motion entrance and the fan blowing his hair. Yeah.
and the Starship Pain, which is stupid, but everyone loves it. It's just like,
I'm a huge fan of John Hennigan, Johnny Mundo, whatever you want to call him. I love the guy. I think he should have been a much. I can't figure out for the life of me what he's doing like in TNA or whatever right now.
right. I mean, it's so funny too, because there was a moment where it seemed like they were going to go with him.
The next Shawn Michaels.
Yes. Like they literally got to that point where like, it was like him and Miz at the. They remember when like Miz first won the title, and then they had that match on Raw.
That awesome Falls Count Anywhere match where he's doing all the parkour stuff.
Yeah, and it's just like, man, this is the like a guy, and then nope, let him go. Let's let all our future stars just walk away.
And he's not in AEW either for some reason.
I think it's because like his wife is with TNA, and like they're happy there together. Is mostly what it is. But also, I think it's partially because I think he's still under contract.
Is he locked into one of those horrible Lucha Underground contracts?
That he is. So I don't think he can sign full time with anybody.
We got to do a Lucha Underground episode sometime.
Just, oh my God.
I feel like that company has very strangely altered many, many careers.
Oh yeah, at this point, like, the contract situation now is maybe the most carny thing in wrestling history.
It's like ironclad, 7-year contracts or something? Like they run out in like 2021.
This non-existent business owns you for 7 years.
Yeah, you can't go be on any real TV show.
And who owns your contract? AAA, who you did not intend to sign a contract with.
Yeah. And they will kill you.
Yes.
They're not just going to sue you. They will kill you. All right. So after a very long and strange preamble, I think we're ready to get to the show.
Let's do it.
It was a long, strange path to this one. It's July 22nd, 2007. We're at the HP Pavilion Arena in San Jose, California. Good crowd of over 13,000 in attendance. The pay-per-view does 229,000 buys, which is no real change from the previous year's show, which was headlined by Rey Mysterio versus King Booker for the World Heavyweight title. And I gotta say that number's probably a little disappointing given that.
Oh yeah, I think so.
You did your kind of huge dream match main event, and you barely outdrew Mysterio versus Booker.
Like, I don't know like what they actually expected though, because it's not like Lashley's any sort of bankable star at this point. Like, this is his first ever main event.
And their business didn't sink after the Benoit thing, but it was down. There were definitely some people who tuned out.
Oh God, yeah, there had to have been.
It was a hard time. It was a weird time to watch. I guess the other thing we should mention is the year before this, they were still doing like the one brand pay-per-views. It was just a SmackDown show the year before this. Now they've recombined and it's Raw and SmackDown and ECW all on each pay-per-view. So given that, you would really expect to be doing stronger numbers.
Absolutely. I agree.
On commentary, we've got Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler from Raw, Michael Cole and JBL from SmackDown, and Joey Styles and Taz to call the one ECW match.
Imagine you have to like drive 4 hours out of your way to go to a town just to call one match.
And sit there for the entire show.
Yeah.
Like, they wouldn't let them go backstage. They sit out there at the desk the whole show.
And just watch.
Yeah. Watch and talk to each other.
Well, see, this is what I don't understand too. Is like, this is before the network. But now, if they did this like kind of thing now, like you could have like alternate commentary from the other commentators that you could watch on the network. That'd be interesting.
Actually a cool idea.
Yeah. Let Joey Styles and Taz call all the matches, and then just give them the option to watch it. Make it a DVD extra.
What you think of the commentary here? I mean, by this point, JR and Lawler pretty far past their prime already, I'd say.
Yeah. JR really shines twice on this show. Like Orton versus Rhodes, Lawler or JR comes to life because of Dusty. And then like he actually delivers in Cena versus Lashley.
Yeah.
Like big, like he treats it like a big deal, which is great. Lawler may as well not even be there.
The last 10, 12, 15 years of Jerry Lawler's career have just been him phoning it in.
I can't remember a single fucking thing he says on this show. I just finished watching it.
I thought Cole and JBL were a really good team at this point.
It's actually not bad at all. Like before they kind of devolve into like JBL burying Cole or like heel Cole and all that stuff. Like at this point, Cole's working very well with like pretty much anybody they put him with. He worked really well with Taz. He works really well with JBL. Like he gets the most out of like Booker and Stryker when they stick them with him.
They give him some coach. They gave him some horrible partners.
Well, like this is where Michael Cole is really trying.
Yeah.
Like at this point now too, he's phoning it in like JR is here. Like in 2019, he's where JR was in 2009, you know? Like he's just phoning it.
And I don't know, Styles and Taz, they call one match. I like Joey Styles. I'm a big fan.
I don't like him and Taz together because I feel like Taz is like way too laid back for like how excitable Joey is. Like I feel like there could have been a much better partner for Joey, and they never find a good partner for Joey.
Well, no, and the amazing thing is they take him off commentary not that long after this.
Yeah,
I wonder if he asked to get out because I don't think he was.
No,
he was not doing. He came to WWE to call Raw. He was supposed to be the voice of the company, and he ended up calling the C Show. So
I really think he could have been the voice of the company if they had gotten rid of Lawler, because I honestly feel like that was the biggest thing in his way. Like,
yeah, that Lawler hated him.
Negative 1,000 chemistry.
Yeah,
to the point where they like played it up on TV.
When he showed up, it was such a breath of fresh air, and he was really good. He was like bringing it,
and like he was like calling the moves more, but he was still carrying across the stories. Like he seemed for a bit like the perfect WWE announcer.
Yeah, well, he reminded me of like Jim Ross circa like 1993, where he really had something to prove.
Right.
And this was him getting his shot and just going all out for it.
I wonder, who would you have put him with? Like, what's a common?
Who did they have at that? I'm trying to think who they had at that point. That's 05. They brought him in. Like you said, Taz isn't a great fit. Taz is the color guy on SmackDown. Do they have anyone else?
I mean, I don't think he and JBL are going to work at all.
No, JBL's still a wrestler when they brought him in.
Yeah, you're right. Like him and Coach obviously is a disaster.
Coach. I mean, it's a thin stable of commentators they've got at that point.
And here's the thing.
Is there somebody out there in another company who you can just bring in? I mean, the other guy, I think they really wanted Mike Goldberg.
They did. They tried for a long time.
Yeah. I think they really made a run at him here when JR needed time off. JR was sick.
Yeah.
And could never land him.
The sad fact is that Joey Styles' ideal commentary partner is probably Corey Graves.
Yeah.
And missed it by a decade.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of who you would have put him with.
No, I can't think of it either. There just wasn't a lot of good commentary.
This is out of left field. Joe Rogan.
I guess you could have done that. I just don't think.
Kind of surprised Joe Rogan never did. I don't know. Joe Rogan, not a wrestling fan.
I don't know if he is or not. I feel like they would have worked him in if he was.
Yeah.
By now.
Yeah. Oh, so opening package is all about Cena versus Lashley because this is a one-match show.
Yep.
Opening match, U.S. Championship, MVP defends against Matt Hardy. I love this feud.
This was such a random feud, and I feel like so much of it was born of just like, well, we got all this airtime. Let's just fill it with these two.
These guys having beer drinking contests, jump rope contests. Was it Hardy or MVP who boxed Evander Holyfield?
Oh, I feel like it was MVP.
Yeah, I think it was MVP. Had to box Evander Holyfield with Michael Buffer doing the introductions on Saturday night's main event.
Oh, man.
This is probably the most over MVP ever was. He's just taken the title off Benoit.
Yes, I definitely think that it is.
This is when he looks like he's a future world champ.
I think we've covered. Did we cover his debut? I feel like we've covered MVP before, and like we don't really need to get into like how they swung and missed on him so hard, but like they did. He really seemed like he had something here, like just the entrance and the swagger, and like he was starting to really get
He
over.
ruled. I
Yeah,
loved everything about the guy. Loved the look, loved the character, the promos, the ring work. I mean, I think it came down to I think they were kind of uncomfortable pushing a guy who had such a serious criminal record. And also, like, he's not a company guy. Like,
right.
he will make his opinions known, and his opinions are not popular ones.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, he basically is the US or Intercontinental champion for about the next 5 years at this point.
and like he like off and on gets more and less popular as time goes on too. Like he always stays at least a little bit over. But like this was the chance. Like with a guy like that, like if you don't capitalize on the momentum, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. And he turned face, and like he's not, he was okay as a face, but like this is a heel character.
Oh, he's desperately unlikable. Like he's impossible to cheer for.
It's a pretty good match. MVP keeps going for the big boot. Hardy catches him with a clothesline. Hardy goes to the top rope. MVP hits him with a superplex. They do a bunch of counters, and Hardy hits the side effect. Hardy recovers. MVP goes for the big boot, but Hardy dodges it. He gets a schoolboy. MVP finally hits the boot, and then his awful overdrive finisher for the pin. That is a terrible move, and I don't understand why every guy who came out of OVW like used it as their finisher.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like when it comes to getting over as a wrestler, there's like 5 elements that you can't do without all 5 in order to become like a major star. You've got to have a good look. You've got to have a good entrance theme. You've got to have like a decent talking ability. You got to be at least passable in the ring. And you got to have a finisher that people want to watch your matches to see happen.
And MVP never found one in my mind.
No, this finisher fucking
Oh, it
sucks.
was horrible. And
It's
like,
the worst hackneyed garbage.
what is he eventually transitions into like a kind of STO type deal?
Yeah, and then he starts like the drive-by, which is like a half-ass like shining wizard. It's like none of this is working, Bo. It's not gonna happen.
No.
It's just a shame. Because like especially like look at what a great finisher can do. Like Randy Orton hasn't been interesting in 15 years. People still watch for the RKO.
Yeah. Ooh. But yeah, a very good opening match there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We go backstage for an interview with Dusty Rhodes, who, for some reason, will wrestle Randy Orton in a bull rope match tonight.
Very, very little provocation for that. Basically, like 1 segment worth of build to this coming out of retirement bull rope match.
Randy beat up Cody.
Not even. Like Randy just like went backstage and like said Dusty like, "Hey, you're a piece of shit," and slapped him in the face. And then
disrespectful dickhead Randy Orton was just the best.
Yeah, he just show up backstage and just like disrespect his elders, and it was great. Like, oh my god. Do you remember the segment where like Hulk Hogan's walking to his car at the end of the show?
Yes.
Like, runs in and RKOs him on the hood.
That was brilliant.
That was just Randy back then, man. And like
he's
that,
like, oh yeah, and I banged your daughter.
Legend Killer Randy Orton is maybe the most hateable heel I've ever seen on television.
I mean, the like crazy explosive like skinhead Orton was a good change of pace when they did it, but to me, yeah, Legend Killer Randy Orton is always the real Randy Orton.
Oh god, yes. And it's just like it so fits because it's true. Like he's the future of the company, and it's so obvious.
Everything that awful gnarly metal theme, the sparkler entrance, the posing, the gelled spiky hair. What a shit!
Just like disaffected nature and like the headlocks, the long, loving headlocks.
Yeah, you can't help but hate this guy.
It's beautiful.
Next match, we've got a Cruiserweight Open as Chavo Guerrero defends against Jimmy Wang Yang, Shannon Moore, Funaki, and Jamie Noble. I swear they had one of these matches on like every single pay-per-view from, I don't know, 2004 to this point, because this is where the cruiserweight title dies.
They had nothing for any of these guys to do.
No,
Like Shannon Moore, seeing him, he's like mid transition into Prince of Punk. Shannon Moore,
that was a good character.
sure. Jimmy
Jim
Wang Yang,
Yang, the redneck cowboy.
which actually got super over.
Yeah, Vince loves him. Vince always thought he was still with the company.
Oh my God, you're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, he's the one who, like, whenever he would come to visit backstage, Vince would think he was still. It's like, where have you been?
Vince, I've worked here
Fired me.
10 years.
Funaki, SmackDown's #1 announcer,
SmackDown's #1 announcer, man.
and Jamie Noble. He's the pit bull here, right?
Yeah,
He's not the redneck anymore.
Well, they had formed the Pitbull.
Him and Kid Cash.
But Cash got released for drugs, I think.
I did like that tag team while it lasted.
Yeah.
Somehow no Gregory Helms here. I felt like he had this belt for 3 years.
Yeah, like I think he defended it like twice in 3 years. Yeah. That's just how things went for a while.
Hornswoggle runs through the ring and hides under it before the match. What could be happening here?
Let me just say this. I thought that was surprisingly genius. If you're going to do this stupid ass thing, like that's a pretty funny way to do it.
I don't really feel like talking about this match. There's a bunch of spots. Nobody cares. Hornswoggle runs in. He hits the tadpole splash, gets the pin, wins the title. He is the final cruiserweight champion until they bring the belt back in 2016, and it sucked again.
Yeah. Like they should just have Hornswoggle come out and win it again now to be like, yeah, this is over.
just the lights go out on 205 Live.
Just Hornswoggle oversees the demise again.
Yeah, so this is the end of the proud legacy of the cruise. I mean, not in the WWE, but like this WCW Cruiserweight division was something special, and this is the continuation of it, and they have finally killed it here. But it's been dead for years at this point.
Oh yeah, like it's nobody notices when the title goes away.
Nobody cares.
It doesn't matter.
We get a Lashley sizzle package and then a Singapore cane on a pole match as the Sandman takes on Carlito. God damn, the Sandman was looking good here.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of the whole time I was watching this match. Is like, God damn,
he quit drinking beer.
Out. Yeah,
like he's got abs,
and like he looks good. Like he's as agile as you could expect him to be. He's like
clean,
bumping all over the place.
Yeah, like I remember there being buzz that like Vince was really high on him and they were going to give him a push, and I can believe it. He's got charisma. He was having some of the better matches of his career.
I mean, he kind of did get a push. Like he's like one of the last ECW guys left, right?
Yeah, and then he very abruptly gets fired. Like in the fall, and I don't know why.
I don't know why either.
It's the Sandman. You can probably guess.
Yeah.
Sadly, he has not been welcomed back. He would be a very welcome addition to some alumni shows.
Oh God, yeah. Like I just like having like a wild card like him around, and he's trying so hard in this match. He and Carlito have maybe the most opposite styles of any two wrestlers I've ever seen. Like a smooth, polished second generation wrestler who does lucha versus the fucking Sandman.
Yeah, versus the construction worker who I don't know if was ever formally trained to wrestle.
I mean, the way that he bumps, it certainly seems like he does not know formally what he's doing. But like, it works. They do good here.
My first reaction, they've got the pull from the Carson City Silver Dollar match in WCW. This thing is insanely high.
Oh, yeah. Like spoiler, Sandman goes to climb this thing. He literally has to shuffle up the fucking thing.
Man, I was impressed by that.
But like, how do you have... He's the Sandman. There was a good chance he wasn't going to be able to do this.
Oh, no. Especially after he's at a match.
And that's the maddening thing to me. It's like, why are you putting guys in things that they can't actually do?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in WCW, they had to have Jimmy Hart scale the thing. Champion rope climber Jimmy Hart.
Just crazy.
Sandman gets the cane. He swings at Carlito, but gets caught with the backcracker and pinned. It's a 5-minute match, and I enjoyed it. I was glad they didn't try to go longer than they did.
No, this is exactly what it needed to be. I was into it.
Todd Grisham then interviews Randy Orton, who says that today is Shawn Michaels' birthday, but he doesn't know it because Orton punted him in the head, and now his brain doesn't work.
I fucking love it.
Yeah. Also, Orton was already doing the punt. This is 07. Like
this is right at the start, yeah.
Yeah, the Michaels match is the first time he did it, I think. But yeah, it doesn't become like a lethal weapon until like a year after this.
Yeah, when I think the first time it like really becomes lethal.
Punk.
Yeah, he does it to Punk, and then it gets the reputation of putting people out.
Yeah, he knocks out Punk with it, and then the Vince one, which we'll cover that sometime. But that's one of my favorite angles of all time.
Fucking crazy, crazy Vince. Like, hey, do a punt, but make sure it connects with my brain.
And somehow 10 years after that, he let Kevin Owens hard way him with a headbutt.
He's a crazy fuck, man.
He really is. Next up, we've got a women's title match as Candice Michelle defends against Melina. Candice had won the belt from Melina at Vengeance. I had forgotten how annoying Melina's screaming was.
Yeah, and it's a shame because like she was really underrated in the ring. Like
really good athlete
for this era. Like this. The funny thing is, when I think about Candice Michelle, all I can think about is I spent so much time arguing on the internet during this period. Because like I would be like defending John Cena and defending Bobby Lashley, defending Randy Orton, and Candice Michelle was one of those people. She is sort of like a low-key Trish Stratus story, where like she was brought in.
I thought this match was pretty good.
Yeah,
especially for a WWE women's match from this era. They didn't screw anything up. That's about as much as you could ask for.
Oh god, yeah. Like Candice Michelle was tits and nothing else. Like that for the longest time. And like she literally like trained how to wrestle and got pretty okay at it. Like this is good. I enjoyed this match a lot.
Oh, Candice wins with a back suplex. And now that we've empowered women, let's tear them down with this next segment.
Okay. Let me paint you a word picture.
This was so bad.
Okay. Candice Michelle successfully defends her title, debuts her new finisher, wins clean over Melina, holds the belt up high, proud woman, immediately. And when I say immediately, I mean without a cut. They go to her backstage, walking up to the Hardy Boys, who are just standing there, and just immediately grabbing a pitcher of water and soaking herself in it sexily for their amusement. The Hardy Boys, Matt looks at her like you would imagine Big Daddy V looks like at a ham sandwich on the craft service table. And Jeff looks at her like bemusedly, like, what is this woman doing? While she just like for 30 unstopped seconds spins around slowly while dumping more and more water on herself.
Yeah, in slow motion as like porno music plays.
And like
we've seen many like misogynist things on wrestling shows. This is high on the list. Not Trish Stratus being made to bark like a dog bad, but like this is just so transparently trashy.
Yes. And like here's the insulting thing about it too. If this were just an unrelated segment, it would just be like, okay, whatever. But to have the women's champion who just defended her title come back and then just immediately just be tits and ass in a segment makes it like 50 times more offensive to me.
And then Ron Simmons shows up to drop a damn.
Which gets the biggest pop on the entire show.
They were just, this was like the peak of the overuse of that.
But like, you can't blame them for overusing it.
It always worked.
The fans would lose their fucking... Ron Simmons is arguably the most over character in WWE during this point.
Yeah, every time he would show up, crowd would lose it.
Like, how bad do you think that he was pissed that he didn't come up with that before? Like, he had been doing that his whole career. And it never got over like that.
Oh, when he was wrestling, this gimmick would have taken him so far.
Oh my God, yes.
Damn. Next up, we've got an Intercontinental title match as Umaga defends against Jeff Hardy. There's some history here. Umaga beat Hardy for the IC title before WrestleMania on Raw. He then lost it to Santino in Santino's debut in Italy, where they pretended Santino was just a fan out of the crowd, and Lashley interfered and cost Umaga the match. And then Umaga won the belt back from Santino a couple weeks before this.
First of all, Bobby Lashley sure has been in a weird proportion of the biggest moments in history during this period.
Yeah, well, they were all in.
Yeah. Second of all, Umaga is fucking awesome, is he not?
Oh my god, I love Umaga. Just what an incredibly talented guy.
And like, you always thought that he'd be held back because among all the Samoan guys who ever wrestled, he has maybe the worst look. Like, he's just kind of dumpy, but he's not really big.
No.
But like, he's maybe, like, I would say he's probably the best worker of any of them.
Yeah, and when he debuted with this gimmick, I rolled my eyes because it was just so 1980s.
Steve, I'm a Polynesian guy. I was pissed. I was like, really? We're doing this?
Yeah, we're doing a Samoan Savage gimmick in 2005.
Jesus Christ. But like, he won me over time because literally, like, he never turned in a shitty. His jobber matches were better than half the matches on the card.
We both love guys who just kick the shit out of jobbers.
Yes. And just like the Samoan Spike, which on paper should be one of the worst finishers of all time, he just like lift dudes up into the air and just like smash them in the throat. Like, it was great.
This match is awesome. This is like something worth going out of your way to watch. Even if you have seen this, you've probably forgotten about it. This was great.
As much as Carlito and Sandman are like the opposite styles, this is a perfect blend. Jeff Hardy takes bumps, Umaga deals punishment. It's a match made in heaven.
Oh, so Umaga smashes Jeff with a huge Samoan drop, throws him up like 10 feet in the air and catches him. Jeff makes a brief comeback, but Umaga catches him out of the air with an insane swinging side slam where he swings him like 3 times, and Jeff folds up like an accordion on the slam.
God, it's just so like this is also during the period where Jeff's doing the best work of his career. Like, this is coming off of the year where he was just in like IC title matches, like paying his dues again. And like, this Jeff Hardy is unbelievable.
Umaga misses a huge diving headbutt off the second rope, and Jeff makes a comeback. He ducks a charge from Umaga, who crashes and burns over the top rope. Jeff follows up with a plancha to the floor. Jeff goes for a sunset flip. Umaga blocks it and tries to sit down on him, but he misses. Jeff hits a drop kick for 2. At this point, I love that Lawler starts cheering for Jeff because he's just so infectious.
Yeah. And like, Lawler, it's probably the only time Lawler actually becomes like actively interested in the show during the whole time it's on.
Jeff hits the Whisper in the Wind for 2. Twist of Fate, Swanton Bomb, gets the 1-2. Umaga kicks out at the very last second.
It's a big ooh from the crowd.
Yeah. Jeff goes for another Twist of Fate, but he gets pushed off and blasted with a super kick. Umaga puts him in the corner, runs his giant ass into his face, which I always loved that as an Umaga move.
Oh, yeah. Like, I love that, like, he's basically Rikishi's moveset, but done, like, way faster and more vicious.
And then the Samoan Spike for the pin. Great match.
Also, Jeff Hardy is the only person I've ever seen take the Samoan Spike and end up on his chest. Like, he does, like, a full backflip in mid-air. It's awesome. Like, this is so fucking good. I could have watched these two wrestle 100,000 times, though I think they only really wrestled, like, 4 times.
Yeah, I can't remember when it was, but they have a great Falls Count Anywhere match at some point where Jeff wins with a Swanton Bomb off a trailer.
Yeah, that's the one where he like slides down the stairway banister and clotheslines him. And
yeah. They do a John Cena hype package, and then we've got our ECW championship match as John Morrison defends against CM Punk. Morrison does not have the awesome music yet or the entrance.
It's like the beginning of the awesome music. It's like without the singing in it. It's just like the instrumental version. Yeah. And so like he's not a total package here yet, and neither is Punk. Like these are both very formative times for both of them.
Yeah. Punk gets a nice pop, though.
Yeah. Punk was over the second that he walked through the door.
Yeah.
Like revisionist history will have you believe that like WWE didn't know what to make of him until the what was his stable called?
The Straight Edge Society.
That's the one, yeah. But like no. Like the fans knew what they wanted like right away. Like he was over from the moment he debuted.
Punk's in control, scores with a big roundhouse kick to the chest for 2. Some really great counters. Then the match ends a little abruptly as Punk goes for a springboard clothesline, but Morrison catches him with a knee to the quad. Punk like hits his head on the landing, and Morrison just pins him.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an odd as an ending. Like you would have thought that he would at least like followed up with something to end it, but
did he even have a finisher at this point?
He had the Moonlit Drive.
Oh, that shitty swinging neck breaker.
Yeah, it's just garbage. Like until he found Starship Pain, he wasn't really ready.
Which he would hit like a quarter of the time.
Yeah, it was a move that was like cool. Oh, he missed.
Oh, he touched him with his hand.
It's fine.
Then we've got a Texas bull rope match as Randy Orton takes on Dusty Rhodes. Gotta be a bull rope match. God damn.
It's gotta be. And like the show before this, they literally had to like send like Lawler into the ring to explain to people what the fuck a Texas bull rope match was.
Yeah. So Cody Rhodes has debuted just a few weeks prior to this as part of this feud. Cody's all of like 21 years old at this point.
He looks it too. He looks like a baby.
Oh, he's a baby. He's so skinny. But he was already smooth and polished. He was ready for prime time.
And this really seems to be building to like a gigantic fuck off match between Cody and Randy, which really doesn't happen.
No, a year after this, Cody joins up with Randy.
Like there's an interesting through line of Cody's career where he's like constantly like wrapped in with Randy Orton.
Yeah.
Like his career starts right here with Randy. He makes it as a star with Randy, and like he's feuding with Randy on SmackDown years later. But like that would take more effort to actually produce on television than they actually wanted to pay.
Yeah. I don't know how much we've ever talked about Cody. Love the guy.
Yeah, surprisingly
huge fan from Go.
Considering he's arguably the second most important person in the world of wrestling today.
Yeah. And it's just in his blood, isn't it?
See, here's the thing is when Cody Rhodes first debuted, looking like he had 2 black eyes with those like big hound dog eyes with like the little tights.
Yeah.
He seemed like he was a little too small to make it because it was still like right at the end of the time where you had to be a big dude who was jacked to make it.
He's so skinny back then.
If he debuted now, it would have been a totally different story.
Yeah.
But back then,
now he's like a super heavyweight.
Yeah. But
especially now he's bulked up.
Yeah, exactly. Like at the time though, he was like one of the smaller dudes on the roster. He could have been a cruiserweight.
Yeah.
And he comes in and like his promo skills aren't really there. He'll develop those over time. But like once he gets into like Legacy and is like part of Priceless with DiBiase, like he shows so much personality. And it's amazing that he had so much personality and they never found anything to do with it. Like it's one of the big failures of WWE. And it's part of the problem is that during this period, they have so many guys who seem like they could be stars. And they just can't decide, like, well, should we run with this guy? Should we run with this guy? And they lose them all.
I think a lot of it is they just needed to pick a couple guys. And instead, they kind of tried to push everybody. And nobody's over that way.
It's just paralysis. It's just like, do we push Wade Barrett? Do we push Drew McIntyre? Do we push Cody Rhodes? Do we push Ted DiBiase? Just push anybody.
Yeah. I mean, of those guys we listed, is Cody the best choice?
I think the future has borne out that yes.
Yeah. Did he have to go blonde for that to happen?
I will say this. I never saw Cody Rhodes as like a world champion until this Cody Rhodes that we have now.
Yeah. American Nightmare.
He had to leave to become this, which is why WWE, they always should have let people go when they had nowhere to go. Like with their characters.
Couldn't Dolph Ziggler have become such a bigger star if he had left in like 2012 or 2013?
Yes, and they let him work in like Ring of Honor or New Japan, and develops a following and the fans get behind him and he comes back, much bigger star.
Yeah.
This is what would have inevitably happened to Cody had this sequence of events not happened leading to where we are with AEW. Like, it seemed like he was going to come back in like 2020 in the Royal Rumble and be like the biggest pop and like win the title.
And the thing I find so fascinating about Cody is that it seems like he was like Dusty's science project. Like Dusty tried to build him to be the perfect professional wrestler.
Oh, that's literally what happened.
Yeah.
It's
He was
just like,
well, I screwed up with Dustin, but I got another shot. Now that Dustin is. Dustin's such a legend, so underrated.
Yeah. But if you hear like Cody's backstory, like so much of it is just like Dusty working him relentlessly in the gym, putting him in sports. Like, you're going to be
amateur wrestling. Acting is the big thing. Like, send him to take acting classes.
Cody was designed to be the perfect pro wrestler. And not just pro wrestler. Like, he got an education in booking that you can't buy from one of the preeminent bookers in wrestling history and his dad.
There's no booking school.
Yeah. It's just like him being in control of one of the major promotions, maybe the second biggest promotion in the world, seems like destiny now that you look back.
How poetic is it? But like the son of Dusty Rhodes, the man who went toe-to-toe with Vince at the formative period, and he lost that battle, but
it's like
now his son takes up the mantle.
It's like a fucking comic book story. Like, oh, you beat me? Well, I'm going to spend the next 25 years designing my son to defeat you.
Yeah, you beat me, humiliated my family, spat on my legacy. But we'll see who has the last laugh.
And if somewhere down the line AEW buries WWE somehow, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So this match, no DQs or countouts. You win by pinfall or submission, and they're hooked together by the bull rope. This is how all strap matches should work.
Yeah.
No touching the four corners bullshit.
We have covered before that touching the four corners is my least favorite match stipulation of all time.
It never works.
No,
there's no way to make it interesting. There's no way to make it good.
They all end exactly the same way.
Yeah.
With
it's
one
super
guy.
fake.
It sucks.
It's wrestling.
But to do it this way, or like the dog collar match way,
they're just strapped together. They can't get apart.
And like, I love the way this match unfolds too, because it's just like Randy doesn't know what to do with the strap, but Dusty knows all the tricks.
Dusty knows all the moves. Yeah. Dusty manages to like yank him, get him in the balls, like flip him over with the rope. And Randy's just like, what the hell? What do I do?
Yeah.
Orton takes over. He gets Dream in a chin lock, then waffles him with the cowbell and gets the pin. It's like a 5-minute. I mean, Dusty's very old at this point. Like, he's long past. I mean, Dusty couldn't wrestle much by about 93, so can't expect too much from 15 years past that.
No. And I mean, this is a fine match for what it is. Like, it's fan service, basically. Dusty gives a couple atomic elbows, and everything's fine. Or bionic elbows. God, please don't tweet me about that. But it's just, it's nice. It's nice to see him in there. And then he goes for the punt and like Cody comes flying into the ring and they have a stare down. And it's like, this is money. This is a money match right here.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen.
Nope. Yeah. And not on any big scale. I think they had a match on Raw.
Yeah.
Then we've got the World Heavyweight Championship match as Great Khali defends against Batista and Kane. Khali is absolutely dominant early. He looks great throwing both Batista and Kane around the ring. Khali clears off the announce table. Both Kane and Batista try to put him through the table, but they can't pull it off. So then they team up and hit a double spine buster on the big guy through the table. Was not expecting that.
No, that's a good spot. It really was. This is the most bumps I think I ever saw Khali take in a match.
Yeah. That leaves Kane and Batista to fight it out in the ring. Batista goes for a superplex, but he gets knocked off the top rope. Kane follows that up with a diving lariat. Khali gets back in the ring, and Kane choke slams him. Batista breaks up the pin at 2. On the floor, Batista slams Kane into the ring post, and he's out. Batista hits a hangman on Khali. He gets into the ring, but he eats a big boot. He throws Khali out of the ring. He goes for the Batista bomb on Kane, but he gets backdropped. Kane hits a choke slam. That only gets 2. It's a much better match than I was expecting it to be.
I don't know what it is about Batista, but whenever Batista was the smallest man in a match,
Yeah.
it was a good match.
Yeah, because he'd
I-
show off how athletic he was and how much he
Yeah.
could bump.
Like this, like he's bumping like crazy in this thing.
Kane comes into the ring with a chair. He gets hit with a spine buster by Batista. Batista hits the Batista bomb on Kane, but Khali manages to pull Batista off. He throws Batista into the steps. Then he gets in the ring, hits the tree slam on Kane, and pins him. A much, much better match than you would have expected.
Absolutely. Like I genuinely liked it. Like Khali looks great at the end of it too.
Then we get a Triple H return promo set to King of Kings. Triple H has been out since January. He tore his quad in a match where he was teaming with Shawn Michaels against Randy Orton and Edge at the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view.
Yep.
Then King Booker comes out. He complains about Triple H calling himself the King of Kings. He says he's the one true king. He also rips on Jerry Lawler. Then he orders Lawler to turn over his crown, and Lawler refuses. And Booker says that's treason, but then he just leaves.
Is this setting up for like the formation of King Booker's court or something?
No, that already happened. I think he beats up Lawler like to get heat, and then he gets his ass kicked by Triple H at SummerSlam.
Oh, because I was waiting for something to happen, but he just walks away, and I'm like, oh,
And I think he's out of the company after that. I think this is it for him.
oh yeah, he's right over in TNA, like right afterwards.
Yeah.
What do you think of King Booker as a character? I don't know when we're going to get to talk about King Booker.
It was a lot of fun, and I think it was the freshening up he needed at that point in his career.
Yeah, like during the darkest hour of SmackDown, like he kind of stepped in and like got over at a time where they desperately needed anybody to get over. Because like he was feuding, like he was having like main event feuds with like nobody.
I mean, this is just a bad time for SmackDown. I don't know why they stuck with the split rosters for so long. Like, as I'm reading this off, does this really feel like a time where the company really needs 2 rosters? Obviously, a lot of people are hurt at this moment in time.
Well, it's not 2 rosters, it's 3 for fuck's sake.
That's right. I forgot about ECW.
Like they have their talent spread out over 3 fucking rosters.
Yeah, they've diluted themselves so much.
And like all the future good talent is on ECW. So there's like no up and comers on any of the other ones.
Then we get a video package for the main event. We get comments from Bret Hart, Steve Austin, Batista, Ric Flair, Mick Foley, and JBL. Just great stuff.
Absolutely.
Then they do the tale of the tape, which I always love.
And to like play, and this time, like a lot of the time they do the tale of the tape, and it'll be like the very famous one where Brock Lesnar's like 2-time champion, NCAA wrestling champion, John Cena, Doctor of Thugonomics.
Yes. Yeah. This time they actually both have legitimate accomplishments.
Yes. And Bobby Lashley is like got 3 inches and 30 pounds on him, and that becomes the story of the match.
Oh. Lashley's out first. He gets a nice pop, and his music has lyrics, which I don't remember. I think they must have just given these to him.
Yes, this was like right towards the end of his run. They like finally got his music right because they had experimented with it like 5 or 6 times. This was the end, and it's great. You got like the John Henry like hammer blow right at the beginning. You got the lyrics in, which are pretty good. And like his like when he hits his pose and the explosion happens is some of my favorite pyro of all time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the jumping up onto the ring apron is awesome.
Yeah. And just like the pyro goes off and it's like there's a storm in the distance. It's like, man, this is a cool entrance now.
And Cena's out to the typical mixed reaction.
Yeah, what I was surprised about, like, I didn't remember how the crowd was on this show. I kind of expected that they would be like, kind of like, on Lashley and kind of like, boo on Cena. The fans, this is a hot match.
Yeah.
Like, I was very surprised.
They lock up and do a test of strength. Lashley knocks Cena down with a shoulder block, but then he misses a corner charge, and Cena hits a throwback and a scoop slam. Cena follows that with the fisherman suplex, and then that diving leg drop bulldog, which I just love that move.
I love it. Took it from Kenta Kobashi.
Lashley pops up and he hits Cena with a rib breaker. He locks on a chin lock with body scissors, which is an unusual move from him.
Absolutely.
Cena gets going with the blue thunder bomb and the five knuckle shuffle. He gets Lashley up for the FU, but Lashley slips out and hits a spine buster.
It's around. No, keep going, because I'm just going to talk all the way at the end of the match. Go ahead.
Cena scores with the FU out of nowhere, but he can't make the cover immediately. When he finally does, Lashley kicks out at 2. Lashley sets up for a spear. Cena catches him with a drop toe hold and locks on the STFU. Lashley manages to fight his way to the ropes, and Cena has to break it. Then Lashley just explodes out of nowhere with a huge spear for a 2 count.
Fucking love that spear that he would do.
Lashley drags Cena's limp carcass to the corner, gets him up on the top rope, goes for the superplex once, twice, 3 times, but Cena blocks it, repositions, gets Lashley up on his shoulders, hits the super FU off the top rope, and that's enough to get the pin. An awesome main event. I blew me away.
Yes. Now, obviously, Bobby Lashley had never had a match of this quality before in his career. And John Cena, while he had a number of good performances, and especially like carrying like Khali and like having a great one with Umaga, he had great matches with like Shawn Michaels, but he had never had a great match where he was the person leading it.
Yeah.
This is that moment for him. This is the moment that crowns John Cena as like, oh, John Cena can put other people over now. Like, that's very important for him. Also, but like even more importantly, this is the match is the Bobby Lashley show. Bobby Lashley whoops John Cena's fucking ass in this match.
Looks absolutely dominant in there.
Yeah. Like he puts all these great moves. The fucking torture rack slam that he does is like awesome. Like way better than Abyss has ever done it in his wildest dreams. And he looks confident and he's like hitting Cena hard and like really laying it in. And like he looks amazing here. And like there's no way around it. Like this is a good match. Like this is how you put together a face versus face match. Like the plucky, you have to make one of them the plucky underdog to some extent. So Lashley's like working a little bit more heel. And then like he winds up losing not because Cena really bests him, but because he makes a mistake and lets Cena get him on his shoulders onto the top rope. Like that is so much room for a comeback match after this. That's the genius. And then they shake hands at the end. Like, that's why I said this would so easily lead to like a mega power scenario where like these two become friends. But like Bobby always remembers this loss. And like he's always looking to get his match back and he wants that title. Like that so could be what happens. It pisses me off.
So yeah, Cena celebrates. Lashley reluctantly shakes his hand and storms off. As you said, clearly there was more to be written in this story, but Lashley either injured his shoulder in this match or shortly after this, goes on the shelf with surgery, has the problems with Michael Hayes, and ends up asking for his release from the company, and is kind of shockingly not brought back until 2018.
Bobby Lashley's future is also very deeply strange. He'll try MMA, he'll go to TNA, but he won't really stay there. He seems like he's not super happy with wrestling in general after what goes down here, and who could blame him, honestly? But just like he goes to TNA off and on, he eventually finally locks into TNA and winds up becoming a very, very, very good character on their show after everyone has already stopped watching it. And he eventually comes back. Now, but like the most important thing I want to leave you with is like if you've never watched this match, I personally personally need you to go and see it, because I need you, when I'm always talking about what a fan of Bobby Lashley I am, when I'm always talking about how he was actually good and he had all this potential, and you're rolling your eyes and you're listening to me say it for the 1,000th time. This match is why I say that. This match is the moment where no one can realistically deny that he had that potential. And WWE, of all the people they squandered, of all the Cody Rhodeses and Dolph Zigglers and Ted DiBiase's and Montel Vontavious Porters and Ken Kennedys, all of those, I genuinely believe in my heart this was the most money wasted of all of those. Like, this could have been the biggest.
Yeah. Like we said, he had the whole world in front of him here. He had a chance to surpass John Cena and be the top guy of the company. I'd say at minimum he was going to be the top guy on SmackDown.
Oh yeah, like it seems like they like phasing the injury-prone Batista out and replacing him with Lashley, which would have just been smart business.
Yeah, we never got to see him work with Batista. Never got to see him with Orton. Never got to see him with Undertaker.
What a fucking match that would have been.
Yeah, you can write a very different history of this period of WWE if he sticks around.
Yeah, maybe Hardy never gets his shot because they don't need somebody on top to carry that show.
Yeah, we don't have to have the endless Cena Orton matches.
Maybe there's no room for Daniel Bryan or CM Punk to get over the way they did.
That's the thing, is he could have done 10 years. I mean, he could have been with the company the past decade.
There could have been 2 John Cenas on this show.
Oof.
Like, the foundation of a successful promotion that isn't constantly casting about for the final cure. Like, the whole history of the company the last 10 years rewritten.
So yeah, on the whole, this was a much better show than I was expecting.
Fuck yeah. Like, even I, who desperately wanted to watch it and begged you for months, was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I went into this just saying like, okay, I remember seeing the Lashley, that was good. I don't know that I had ever seen the rest of this pay-per-view. I don't think I had.
I watched it live because you know that I was just a sucker for handing over money for anything, but also because, like, you got to know, when I heard my boy was in the main event, I was fucking rapt attention.
Yeah. And is this still Bobby Lashley's only WWE pay-per-view main event?
Gosh, other than WrestleMania
20... that wasn't even the main event. Cena and Michaels was.
You're right.
He hasn't had one since he's come back, has he? Was he in that match against The Shield?
I think he and Roman was the main event, wasn't it?
No, wasn't. It was Rollins and Ziggler in that Iron Man match.
Fuck. Then no, I don't think he's ever been in one.
I think I mean, if I'm remembering this right, I think he was in that tag match against The Shield a couple months ago.
That doesn't count though.
No, that was basically a Saturday night's main event.
I gotta tell you, man, like, what a fucking ridiculous turn of events that is. And it's not like they couldn't have made the decision to get him back sooner. It's not like they couldn't have made the decision to push him upon his return. For some reason, they've just been determined to drop the ball with him.
Well, so there's a couple things there. Is one, obviously, like, Michael Hayes wasn't the impediment to him coming back, because Michael Hayes is still there in a position of much more power and influence than he was back then.
Although not on the show that Bobby's on, I believe. Oh. Isn't he still on SmackDown?
Who? Hayes?
Yeah.
He's like an executive vice president of the company now, though.
Wow.
But I don't know exactly. Yeah, I'm fuzzy on the current setup of creative.
Yeah. Here's the thing, too, is I don't want to belabor this point because I know there's going to be people out there who are going to roll their eyes, and I don't really care, but I just don't want to belabor the point. But black guys don't get to stay in the main event. You know, like, Kofi finally broke through this year, but they had to desperately need him to, you know?
He's going to lose that title and be bounced right back to the mid card.
Exactly. And, like, look, I'm not saying everybody in WWE is a gigantic racist. I'm just saying, when you look at Bobby Lashley, I don't know that I've ever seen a main eventer more obvious in my entire life. And here he is doing jack shit again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very much the case that throughout history, many wrestling promoters have been fascinated by the idea of a big African-American babyface.
Yeah.
Bill Watts had the junkyard dog and then tried to recreate him for the entire rest of his career.
And on that point, having a black world champion does not mean that you're not a racist. Bill Watts is a racist.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But like, especially in this case, WWE just never really runs with them. You know what I mean?
They really wanted Ahmed Johnson. They were
Yeah.
thirsty with Ahmed Johnson, and he just was not capable.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's just, and I understand the word I'm about to use, but colored the experience for them ever since. I don't know what the case is. It pisses me off, is all that I know. Like, whether it's all just a series of reasonable coincidences or a racist agenda that they don't even realize that they're doing, or just flat racism. I don't know. But like, it's the story of WWE. And it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon.
Well, yeah, that is the Great American Bash 2007. What an interesting show this turned out to be.
Yeah, for like a show that we just thought that we were going to talk about Lashley and can talk about like a little bit here and there, like we got kind of deep on a couple of occasions here.
I mean, it's a very tumultuous time for this company. I mean,
Oh,
I'm not sure if you weren't a fan during this, I'm not sure we can properly kind of relay to you how surreal this was. Like, I don't know if it's fair to say everybody was talking about pro wrestling, but like a lot of random people who didn't watch wrestling or had not watched it for years were suddenly talking about wrestling. Like,
and in an incredibly negative light.
oh yeah, I mean, Vince had to testify in front of Congress about steroid usage in WWE. Dave Meltzer was on the Bill Simmons podcast to talk about Chris Benoit. I mean, I was I suddenly had my friends who hadn't watched wrestling for years like hitting me up asking me like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, and like if you were talking to somebody who was like not even a casual fan who just didn't know about wrestling for years after this, all they would know about it was Benoit.
Yeah.
Like it became difficult to be a public wrestling fan again. It became like very like out in the media. Like it took a long time for the PR machine to fix that.
I mean, I think it kind of started changing, I'd say around 2011, 12 with like the Punk stuff, then The Rock coming back and The Rock becoming such a huge mainstream movie star and John Cena kind of becoming a movie star.
Yeah. They were very fortunate that they had John Cena as the face of this company for this 10-year stretch.
Because he was very much like the most like white bread, perfect kind of like couldn't ask for like a nicer guy or more promotable guy to be the face of the company.
And also is probably why John Cena has a secret like murder sex dungeon in his basement that he signed non-disclosure agreements with Nikki Bella about. We're going to find out that there's so much weird shit about him one day.
And speaking of guys who are wound way too tight.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a wrap for the Great American Bash 2007. We got to talk about the real death of Chris Benoit and the fake death and resurrection of Vince McMahon and Donald Trump and Mark Miro and all sorts of other interesting things. Cody Rhodes, AEW. This one was all over the place.
Bobby Lashley.
Yeah, and most importantly, Bobby Lashley.
Most importantly, Bobby Lashley.
And we're going to have another interesting one next time as we get into one of, I think, the best non-major pay-per-views ever in wrestling, which is Canadian Stampede 1997. This one's got a lot of backstory, and it is an absolutely tremendous show.
And we're going to go into all sorts of stuff like how the show actually could have been better and was
believe it or not.
I have never seen this show outside of the main event, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, only 4 matches, but they're all awesome.
Fucking hell.
And just a fascinating, again, tumultuous time in the WWF. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels in a backstage brawl. Brian Pillman returning to the ring. Matches being, big pay-per-view matches being booked and canceled and having to be rebooked on the fly.
Can't wait, man.
Yeah, going to be a great one next time, so tune in for that.